Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
Okay, so we're finally starting to catch up on some of the movies that came out in 2019 that I didn't get to see, you didn't get to see during the year. And so today we're going to talk about Shia LaBeouf's new movie, Honey Boy. He wrote, produced, and starred in this movie. It's exactly a look back at his early career and his life with his abusive father while he was making all of these Disney shows and movies of the week and all of the things that I guess people started getting to know him when he was right around 10, 11, 12 years old. So, and then how it also affected him in the future, how he became an alcoholic. And Lucas Hedges plays the Otis character, which is the representation of Shia LaBeouf as an adult. And then Noah Jupe plays Otis as a younger child, which is Shia LaBeouf as a young kid. So there's a bunch of other actors in there. We've got FKA Twigs, Laura San Giacomo, Martin Starr, and then there is someone who I haven't seen before, but maybe he's been in a couple things. Byron Bowers. Have you seen him before?
I don't think so. But
yeah, he was pretty good.
People have a way of he looks familiar to me, but I don't know him by his name.
Yeah.
So I would have to say no. But he does look familiar to me.
Yeah. So anyway, I finally caught up on this. I did want to see it, especially when the trailer came out. And then I'm burying the lead. Shia LaBeouf plays his dad in this movie. So he's obviously kind of like working through a lot of things in this film. So how did it hit you initially well, first of all, did you have any kind of like, because of the trailer, I'm sure you saw the trailer, because of the trailer, did you have any misgivings going into it from the beginning?
No, I wouldn't say misgivings, no, but I'm a big Shia LaBeouf fan. I have protested to him having an Oscar nomination for Fury, a Miss Oscar nomination. We've talked about that in the past. I will talk about it in the future, and it will continue on based on this movie, and I will make reference to something else and a Miss Oscar nomination for this year, or there's always one person or one movie that I don't get a chance to see before we do our top 10 or talk about the Oscars and that kind of stuff. Luckily, when Fury came out, it was my favorite movie that year, so I knew about that movie, and I was able to say, I think it's a Miss Oscar nomination, and there's a person in this cast that, when I look back on 2019, although close to being a perfect year for me because of Parasite, and let's see how many times we can mention that on this podcast. That's one.
We are 3
minutes in. I'm
minutes
going to take a tally, actually.
There you go. 3 minutes in.
Well, but it's a valid point, if I don't say so myself, because there's always one movie that I go, oh, I wish I'd seen that before I did my top 10. Now, Honey Boy, I'm not sure would have made my top 10. It would have made honorable mentions, but I will, and I'll go ahead and disclose this now. I believe Lucas Hedges was a Miss Oscar nomination. That I'm not saying that he missed an Oscar nomination, but it will be, when I think of 2019, I will think, well, if there was a sixth person, or if there was somebody who was taken off the list, which I don't really like to talk about because those are the 5 nominees. He just blew me away in this movie. So
Is it because he was a representation of Shia LaBeouf, or is it because he lived inside of a character?
Both.
Because I think that the thing that most impressed me was his ability to sound and literally embody the physicality of Shia LaBeouf that we have seen in his roles in Transformers and in other roles as an adult. So that is the most impressive thing to me. But I guess I just have issues with the writing, but maybe that's a different thing to talk about.
Well, very clearly and very quickly you realize this is 90%. This is a 90%er. It is the epitome of 90%. And by that, it's a father and son relationship mending movie. I like the way the movie starts. I like the switch from the young kid hanging up to, or the older Otis holding up, being held up. And then you see the younger Otis being held up. I love the ending of this movie. And I know where you're going with about the writing because I can already predict what you're going to say. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying that I'm going to disagree with you, but this movie's hard. It's not an easy watch. And I was thinking about this today. If 25% of what the father did, he actually did in real life, it's not an excuse and it's not a rationalization, but come on. We can understand why Shia LaBeouf had post-traumatic stress disorder. We can understand why he's getting a drink at a Broadway stage and a bar, and he starts to pee all over the bar in a Broadway stage at a Broadway production, a play. We can understand on some level that this would have messed this kid up until he got help. I love the fact that it is fictionalized, but at the same time, it actually happened to him. He had to go to Shia LaBeouf had to go to mandatory rehab, and he had to write his feelings out because of post-traumatic stress. They actually need you to physically write them out to get them out of you. Talking about it helps, and doing other exercises help, but actually writing it out. So his journals from his rehab became this movie. And I laughed, I cried, I wept. I felt extremely sorry for that little boy. And I just kept saying, this movie it's got to stop. It's got to stop. The father has to have some redeeming quality. And they do try to throw that in there. But by the time they do, I am over it. I cannot take this man anymore. There are numerous things he does that are so abusive that I can't even comprehend how you can look at that 11-year-old little boy, and Noah Jupe is amazing in this movie. I don't understand how you can look at a little boy like that and even contemplate talking about the size of his genitalia. I don't understand it. And it becomes an ongoing dig on him. And that is like the last thing you want your father to do is make fun of your area when you're 11 years old. You're just right on the verge of puberty. That just bothered me the most. I can't imagine not encouraging, not lifting up a young person, but to actually stab at something like that and to actually make it sound like he's talking to one of his like buddies, like he's in the Navy or something. Like the father's in the Navy and he's talking to his buddy. He's joking his buddy about how, I'm well endowed and you're not. He's talking to his 11-year-old kid. So it just bothered me, and it's relentless and relentless and relentless. So it's hard pressed for me to say, oh, I love this movie, but it was a cathartic experience for me. And we can get to the scene later on about Lucas Hedges, because when he says in the cop car in the beginning of the film, you don't know how good I am at my job, I was like, oh my God, he sounds just like Shia LaBeouf. Yep. I mean, just like him. And I was like, without it sounding like an impression. And then like little words were twisted to make him sound like more like Shia LaBeouf. And then I watch a lot of things, like I watch clips from Ellen, or I'll watch YouTube interviews on talk shows. I don't really watch those shows per se, but I will watch particular people on those shows and see what they had to interview and what they had to say about. And I have watched quite a bit of Shia LaBeouf doing press for this tour or for this movie. And I just rewatched something he did on Ellen. And I was like, oh my God, Lucas Hedges should just get an Oscar nomination for that voice that he pulled off, because it's on point. So it's hard pressed for me to say I love this movie because it was detrimental, but I liked more of it than I didn't like. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think for me, the things that I really gravitated towards were the style of the filmmaking and the representation, the symbolism that was put out there. Even I mean, yeah, you're right. The balance between intercutting of the present day present day in the movie, and then him as Otis as a younger child. I thought that there was a good balance between that, but I think that I had a somewhat of an aversion to how the characters were laid out. A lot of it seemed very convenient as far as I know that you're trying to make the father character a complex character, and that they try that because they're inserting in his being sober for so many years, him going to AA meetings, and that being a huge, I mean, that's the biggest Chekhov's gun in the film, really. But it feels too literal to me. The film feels like it's too close to what I assume happened in Shia LaBeouf's life. And I think because of that, he may have been too tied to telling a particular story, whereas I think that he might have been able to mine a little bit more if he would have had a little bit more license with his story. But it doesn't seem like, to me at least, it doesn't seem like Shia LaBeouf made this movie for other people as much as he made it as a cathartic experience. I mean, it was an artistic experience for him and for the other people involved. So the other people involved did get something out of the film. I'm sure Lucas Hedges got something out of the film. I'm sure Noah Jupe. I don't know. There's a kind of a weird thing halfway, through the movie where I'm like, Noah Jupe's in a lot of really difficult situations, and I guess as a young actor, you kind of assume that you're going to be going through those things, but it's really violent, and not even specifically physically, but emotionally. It's super emotionally violent, and even if it's somebody who's not your dad doing these things to you or saying these things to you, it's gotta, I don't know. There's got to be a way for an actor to disconnect somehow, but as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old or however old he is when he's shooting this, it must have been really difficult. But I think that for me, some of the biggest scene that jumped out for me was when young Otis is translating the phone call between his dad and his mom, played by Natasha Lyonne, actually, which I didn't even know until I looked it up. But the fact that he has an instinct to speak in the same tone as his mom when he's speaking to his dad, and to speak in the tone of his dad when he's speaking to his mom, that is that codifies the fact that children are constantly listening. They're constantly learning. They're constantly internalizing. And it doesn't matter what you say, when you say it, they're listening. And that is essential to understanding what kind of effect that Otis's dad has on him as a child, and then obviously how it translates to him as an adult. So I think that more scenes like that, I mean, maybe we couldn't handle a film with all scenes like that, obviously. I mean, that would be just even more torture. But I think that those scenes really kind of, as in a more subtle way, inform the viewer of how he is literally just like downloading every emotion that his parents are going through, and he's able to translate that in a way to each one. And the scene's supposed to be between two divorced parents, but the scene really is just about him. So it's a really great scene, and I haven't seen something like that before. It's shocking. Now, maybe it would be out of character if he wasn't a child actor. Maybe it would have seemed weird if he wasn't a child actor, but the fact that he is a child actor, it's right there in front of you, and the filmmakers take advantage of that. I think that the downside of something like that is later on in the film, we can kind of get into spoilers. I don't think there's really too many spoilers. It's an abusive relationship between a father and a son. There may be reconciliation, there may not be. There's a scene later on in the film where he has shot a scene in his TV show, and his father in the TV show is a loving father, and they have the kind of verbal relationship and emotional connection that he's looking for with his father. And the way that they portray that in the film is really ham-handed, and to me it just kind of sucks the emotional weight out of the film, considering the scenes that have happened before. And all of his scenes with FKA Twigs, who I haven't talked about yet, who I think is amazing. This is her first feature-length film, and she's kind of known as a music artist, as a dancer. I sent you her video. I guess technically it's an Apple commercial, but it's a music video shot by Spike Jonze of an Anderson .Paak song, and it's supposed to be selling the HomePod, but it's just a very well done video. You should definitely look it up. I think it's called Coming Home. But yeah, so she's the main character in that. That's like a 4-minute long music video type thing. So she's great in that. It's the first time I had seen her, but she's great in this film too. And she just has like a loving, understanding, calming presence in the film. And that's exactly what Otis needs in this film. So those scenes all seem really genuine to me, and that makes there's this movie has a lot of great scenes in it, and it makes the not so great scenes really stick out to me.
I don't disagree or have any kind of argument with anything that you said. I completely understand what you're saying. Here's what I think it is. I think you're right. It is a cathartic experience for Shia LaBeouf. But Alma Halel, I believe is how you say her name. I don't know if it's the director, and I don't know if Shia LaBeouf can edit himself and what he's written, but I think that's the responsibility of the director as well as the writer to say, hey, this is starting to become a bit repetitive. And I think that's what's happening. The abuse is so just, like you said, violent. That's a great word for it. It continues to be like that throughout the film. And I'm believing that Shia LaBeouf as the father should have been more of a supporting character than a co-lead. And he's a co-lead. He is in that movie as much as the son, and you cannot take him out of the movie. And obviously it's written like that. So I think that's why I think the repetitiveness of the violence, the abuse, the emotional violence is so overwhelming that it almost becomes white noise at some point. So when these cathartic moments happen, and I understand what you're saying about the father in the scene of the TV show, but I think that's important because not only is a child always listening and taking everything in, but they will find and get the love that they need from whoever presents themselves in a way to be that. Your father will be abusive, but somehow, and Tom, the
big brother,
he represents the father that Otis doesn't have. And for whatever reason, whatever you believe in, God, karma, the universe will present somebody into your life, hopefully, to represent that person. And that's the idealistic look at what a father should be. And that's why it's a little bit hokey, because it's a TV show. It's like Full House. You know, it's one of those kind of shows where they're written so broad and so over the top because that's what situational comedies do most of the time. They do this slapstick over the top caricature of a person because that's what's funny and that's what people can relate to, and it does pull on your heartstrings. But I think the reason why it's so exaggerated in the film is because you need to see such a stark, drastic difference from what's really going on in his real life versus what he would wish would go on and what Tom represents in the middle of both of those two things. Because Tom's a real person. He's down to earth. He's there to help. He has no pretense about it. When he entered the movie, though, I go, oh my God, don't leave him alone with him. Don't leave him alone with the father. He's going to hurt him. And I said, he's going to punch him. I know he's going to punch him. And next thing you know, he's in the pool. And I was like, yep, I saw that coming. So I think that what's happening in this movie is that because it was such a cathartic experience for Shia LaBeouf, that he might not have been able to step outside of himself as a writer and say, okay, if I was watching this as somebody else's work, I might suggest to them that they cut 2 or 3 of the scenes, the abusive scenes. But at the same time, maybe what they wanted to show us was that it was relentless for this little boy and that he could never get away from it and that he could never stop it no matter what. Even when, when he says that thing about, you got to be nicer to me and all that other stuff, I was like, oh no, that's not going to go well. I know this is not going to go well. And then you think it's going well, and then you think it's going well, and then you're like, nope, it didn't go well. I think that scene would have been even more effective, even though it was very effective to me. It would have been even more if we had been a little less inundated with how abusive this father was. It's just continuous. And you have to separate yourself as an audience member because you can't take it all in at one time. And you can't believe that this was actually somebody's father and this was actually happening. You know, it's hard to separate yourself from the fact that this is a true story, even though it's not completely autobiographical. So as an audience member going into it, I already knew that. So maybe that's why it seems so relentless. It would be interesting to not know anything about Shia LaBeouf and not know anything about this world or his world or know anything about him as an actor and see what people would say about it. Because once you know those kind of things, it just becomes, okay, enough is enough is enough. And I don't think that there's complete balance in the film. There's the scene where he is talking at the AA meeting. The father is talking at the AA meeting, and you're starting to feel some kind of sympathy. Not really, but you're supposed to. And then there's the scene where he's in the bathroom and he says to him, you know what it's like for me to have to work for you? You know what that makes me feel like? You're supposed to feel some form of empathy, sympathy, some form of understanding of what the father has gone through. But I don't think it's clear, other than mentioning it about being in the war and being not being able to kind of become successful as the clown and in show business. He was a little too late. They make a point about that. Otis says, well, you could have made it in Hollywood if you started at my age. So maybe if those relentless, violent scenes were cut back a little bit, maybe if we had more of an understanding of the father and why he was doing what he was doing, then maybe the movie would have felt well-rounded for you. I'm not sure. I don't know. But I know that by time he gets that scene where he says, you know what it is like for me to work for you? I'm too damn bad, dude. You don't do nothing for him. Nothing. He says, I get up and I take you to blah, 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 and I make you on time. And then they show that whole scene where the kid wakes up on time. Yeah. The kid makes him coffee. He doesn't even wake up. He gets to set on his own. And then the father just kind of reaches out and grabs the coffee, which he knows is going to be there because his 11-year-old son has made it. So by that point, that bathroom scene, I was over him as a character. So I couldn't open my heart more to him. I just couldn't.
Mm. Well, I mean, I think that I do see where the sympathy would come for his character, because yes, his character has been through a lot, but his character's not able to see, the dad is not able to see his son as someone that he needs to support. He's seeing his son as an equal. Actually, he's seeing his son as a competitor. And so that's where he has this weird dynamic of his son is a competitor of his because he's in show business, his son is in show business, and any job that his son gets is a job that he doesn't get. Now, obviously, he's not going to get the same jobs as his son gets, but that's the mindset. That's his mindset. And so at the same time, he's able to take advantage of the fact that society has told him that since this person is his son, he's in charge of his son, but he doesn't have the capabilities of being, of doing fatherly things, of taking care of his son. He's, his son's like, oh, give me a cigarette. And he's like, oh, sure, here you go. And there's even a scene in there where there's this violent back and forth between the two, and he reflexively, the dad reflexively pulls out his pack of cigarettes, and the son, literally like jumps to reach for his pack of cigarettes. And it's that mirror of both of them going through the same thing. And the only reason why, the main reason why young Otis is reaching for those cigarettes is because he sees his dad reaching for the cigarettes. And so it's those types of things are, yes, I understand why they're on screen. And I understand, they're in some ways hitting us over the head with it, but I think that there's a fine line you have to run between the effectiveness of these scenes. And maybe you're right. Maybe we just got too many scenes. Maybe I'm just more attuned to subtle storytelling, and I just am I'm yearning for more subtle storytelling, or storytelling where I need to dig in a little bit more. Like I want to be engaged in the story to where I have to figure out what's going on in certain things. Whereas if you're just spoon feeding me, I don't get as much out of it. But yeah, I do think that the acting was strong. I think that the directing, actually the shot choices and there's a lot of the way that the film was shot is a lot of handheld and a lot of available light. And I think that lends itself to realism. It actually kind of felt like a documentary. And as I looked back at Alma Hallel's history of filmmaking, I didn't realize this, but this is her first feature fictional film. She's directed other documentaries, and looking back on some of her documentaries, I'm really interested. And there's this one about a very, very small town on the Salton Sea in California called Bombay Beach, and it looks really cool. Just in seeing some shots from it and knowing that she came from a still photography background, it looks pretty awesome. And then also the cinematographer that I listened to, The Hollywood Reporter has those like roundtables, and then they'll make those roundtables available on YouTube.
I love those.
I know, and
I love
and
those.
on they have a podcast called Behind the Screen, and so they put the cinematographer roundtable this year on there. So you've got Rodrigo Prieto, you've got Roger Deakins, who ended up winning the Academy Award for 1917. And you also had Natasha Breyer on there, who was the cinematographer for this film. And so she's worked with a bunch of different people, and she did Nicholas Winding Refn's Neon Demon, and she also worked with David Michôd on The Rover, which I haven't seen, but that's the Australian film with Guy Pearce and Robert Pattinson in it. So that it looks like a rough film, but those are kind of like stark differences as far as the types of films you're looking at. One's kind of like out in the Australian wilderness, and one is glitzy and obviously neon tinged. So coming to this one, it's kind of like her body of work and the breadth of her work is really cool, and I'm interested to see what Natasha Breyer does in the future. So in hearing her talk in this podcast, she mentioned that whenever they were doing scenes in the motel, Shia LaBeouf would come in kind of like as a whirlwind, because he would be, I guess you would consider him a method actor. So he would kind of come in character, and they would just kind of have to roll with it. So what she had to do was she developed a lighting setup so that she could use all the natural, like all the available lights inside the hotel, whether it's the lights above them, like in the ceiling, or lights in the lamps, and then lights outside the windows. And she had all of them on faders, so she was kind of like doing a theatrical production as they were shooting, because they had no idea where Shia LaBeouf was going to go, where his character was going to go, and they had to be able to modify and change and effectively light him and Noah Jupe during those scenes. So just the fact that they're going through this type of a process, it adds another layer of complexity to production like this, which was a really short shoot. I think it was like 30 days or something, and it was a fairly small budget considering all of the things that they had to shoot. So I'm kind of amazed at the process that they had to go through to make this film and to make it look as interesting as it looks. So yeah, I was impressed with the mechanics of the film. So that's good.
I love how you're like trying to pump it up, but at the same time being objective about it. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying when you're talking about, I wouldn't necessarily say that the film is spoon feeding us the information, but it is not as layered for us to pull back the onion. The onion is pulled back and we're looking at the center of the onion when the film starts. So actually it's kind of in reverse. It's like you're looking at the onion peeled apart, and then you're pushing the peels back together to form the onion, which of course you never will be able to, because once it's peeled apart, it's always going to be apart, which is a good kind of an analogy for the actual abuse that he goes through. He has to put those layers back together. And so I think that, I guess maybe, I don't know if it has to do with an acting background or my interest in the hobby of the craft of acting. I don't know if it has anything to do with that, but I guess personal stories, especially father and son relationships, they kind of hit me differently than most people. I don't know if that's because that's what I'm attracted to when it comes to storytelling, or that's what I feel I can understand as an audience member. But I'm not necessarily saying just because everything you need to know is right there, that's not a bad thing, is what I'm saying. I can understand what you're saying when you're saying that you want to pull it apart a little bit more. But sometimes it's okay to say, this is what you need to know, audience, here it is, instead of something like Neon Demon. Perfect example, where you're really having to work it wasn't my favorite film of the year. It was my favorite film of the year that year. So I didn't really have to work that hard, but it definitely is, the symbolism and all the stuff that happens at the end of the film. You're having to figure out what you think about this. And Maybe because most plays are not like that. Well, at least the plays that I've seen and I've worked on are more personal stories. Maybe that's why I'm a little bit more understanding, if you will, of something like this. So I don't necessarily think that, I wouldn't say it's spoon feeding, but I understand why you're using that term. But for me, there's nothing wrong with having everything presented to you and you don't have to dig through the salad to get to tomatoes, because when you shove your fork into the salad, you get the tomatoes automatically. Neon Demon, you gotta search for them damn tomatoes. I mean, you gotta like uncover the lettuce and food analogies, whatever. So I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, but there is something, and it's kind of a compliment at the same time. It's not. The movie is so hardcore that I don't want to experience it anytime soon. I was actually going to try to watch it a second time before we did this podcast, because I watched it a little while ago. And then I decided, nope, I remember enough about it. I remember exactly what I feel about it. I don't know if I need to see it again anytime soon. So I can't really be that much of a judge of something like that. I don't know if it's so surface level that it will bother me. But I do know that, and this once again is a compliment more than it is a criticism, if you will, it's just relentless. And sometimes it's just like, stop. You gotta slow down. It was my deal with Uncut Gems. I actually listened to part of that podcast. It's kind of funny to listen to me try to figure out what I thought about it, because I just wanted it to be over with. And when what happens at the end of that movie happens, you're not supposed to necessarily be relieved. But I was like, yes, finally, shut up. With all due respect, shut up. If that's what had to happen for you to shut up, I'm okay with it, because I'm tired. So I'm thinking that maybe if they had trimmed some of those scenes or cut those scenes down or put them in a different running order, it might have worked a little bit more if you had seen the AA scene first before you saw 3 or 4 of the abusive scenes first. I do have to go back to Lucas Hedges for just a second.
Yeah.
There's something about moments in movies that affect me deeply, and next thing you know, I'm sobbing, weeping openly. And I have the ability to do that, and I'm proud of that, and I think it's a gift. And we've talked about this in the past. Was I going to be able to do it on stage? And it turns out I was able to do it most of the time on stage in that last play that I did, and I'm proud of that. When I stand in my backyard and do monologues and I start to tear up, it kind of feels a little wonky and a little strange, but at the same time, it's like, it also feels cathartic, and that I probably, well, who knows, I might go crazy one day, but I think I'm a little bit mentally healthier than some people who bundle up their feelings. Mine come out. They just do. I can't help it. They just do. I mean, you've seen it. We've had dinners together and I'm like, and I'm just,
well, it's happening on the podcast.
Blubbering.
So yeah, we've heard it on the podcast.
Yeah, it has. And I'm smiling because I'm kind of proud of that. But man, that scene when he finally kind of breaks down, Lucas Hedges has his breakthrough moment, it messed me up to the point where I had to stop the film, and I kept saying, well, I can't say it because we don't cuss on the podcast, but I was like, that effed me up, that effed me up, that effed me up. I couldn't get my head back into the movie because the places that he went, Lucas Hedges, to get there affected me deeply, and I was weeping openly, and it took me a good 15 minutes to readjust to whatever else was happening to the film, because it just hit me and went right through me. If I start to think about it too much, I'm going to have that moment on the podcast again. But I was like, what an interesting life to have as an actor, where you actually get to do something like that on film. But not only you're doing it on film, but you're affecting somebody in Virginia watching it 6 months after it was released. You've actually tapped into some kind of universal code of emotions that I find it amazing. And we talked about it being the dead zone and this, how it shifts and it's more real than real, but it's not. It's an unusual feeling, but he hit me hard, and I will forever think of 2019 as one of the best years in Oscars because of Parasite. That's twice, by the way. And because of Bong Joon-ho and all of the stuff that he did and how powerful this year was, but it will always have a footnote. It will be the year that Lucas Hedges messed me up hard. And he did, man. I don't have this urge to email people or call people or Facebook people or write to people, but I had this major urge to want to reach out and say, dude, you messed me up. And I don't know if that would come across or it would become stalkerish or whatever, but it affected me so deeply.
So there's,
I just had to point that out again.
There's two things with that I find interesting. Number one is the fact that you're bringing up, something that's inherent to art, and the crazy part when you start thinking about art, where yes, one day, a year ago, Lucas Hedges was in a room and he did something, but a couple weeks ago or last week, you saw that thing and it did something to you chemically, it did something to you emotionally, and it was something that was translated through space and through time. Now, when you start thinking about things like Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, like that gets on a whole nother level. Like that was hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it is still doing the same thing to people currently. Art is something that is completely and we're so used to, especially now, there's so much ephemeral art where it's throwaway, whether it's reality shows are art inherently, like they're entertainment and they're art, but it's so ephemeral and it's not something that necessarily lasts. Whereas what Lucas Hedges did that one day, and what, the way that Alma Hallel shot that, and the way that they put that together, the way that Shia LaBeouf wrote it translated to you. So that is really interesting to me. And then the second thing is the fact that you stopped the movie. You had the ability to pause the movie, sit in that emotion, get through that emotion, and then pick up the movie at your leisure. Whereas something like Uncut Gems, you were sitting in a theater and you were enraptured by, actually, you know what? You were held hostage by the Safdie brothers. You had nowhere to go.
Absolutely.
And they utilized their filmmaking techniques, and they utilized their capabilities by having the audience, holding them hostage to push that audience. Now, the filmmakers of this movie had the ability to do the same thing in a movie, if you would have seen it in a movie theater. But the fact that this movie is an Amazon movie, and most people are going to see it on Amazon versus seeing it, or in a rental versus seeing it in the theater, that inherently changes how films are going to be experienced going forward. Now, most films, I'm guessing, especially with the advent of streaming and rentals and all that in the last, especially rentals in the last 40 years, the more movies are experienced in the way that you and I experience Honey Boy. But I think that there's still, it's kind of sad that these filmmakers aren't able to really lean into, I mean, they should lean into the ability of enrapturing an audience and capturing them and holding them for the 2 hours, or in this case, hour and 30 something minutes. And they should still push towards that. But it makes me wonder at what point filmmaking will shift to keep in mind the fact that at any time, anyone can stop the movie. It's already happening in YouTube videos and things like that, where, I mean, shoot, movie trailers. If you watch a movie trailer on YouTube, the first 5 seconds in the movie trailer are shoo, boom, da, boo, da. Oh, this is the movie. And then it gives you the movie trailer. It's this weird, like, pre-trailer, like, don't click away from us for 5 seconds so that we can get credit for you watching our movie trailer. Like, that's literally, like, if they don't grab you within the first 5 seconds, people will just, like, move on to another thing. So the fact that movie trailers have already changed, I mean, that's like marketing for art as opposed to art. Although I would say that movie trailers are an art unto themselves, but inherently the first function of a movie trailer is marketing, is commerce. But I still think that the fact that pretty much all movie trailers are that way now. It's only taken like 2 years. In fact, the first time I ever saw it was Hell or High Water. So whenever that came out, like 2016, 2017, it's been 3 years and every trailer is like that now. So
Yeah, I think the difference though for me is that it's not that I stopped the film because I could. I stopped the film because the moment was so profound. And actually, now I think about it, I'm not sure I did stop it. I'm trying to remember if I stopped it or I just missed the next 5 minutes. I'm not sure. I think maybe we went back. I can't remember. I watched it with a friend of mine. I'll have to ask him. I can't remember now. But all I know is that if I was in the movie theater, I would have missed the next 5 minutes of the film because I would have been so profoundly affected by that moment. So I think it's a little bit different because I come from a different generation than the one that you're talking about. I did talk to somebody I was in a conversation with somebody who was 21 years old, but she was saying that she had to mentally exercise the patience to go see a movie. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, 2 hours is a long time to sit and just watch one thing.
oh,
And I
okay.
instantaneously realized what was happening.
Yeah.
And I said, well, and she was somebody I worked with in a play. And I said, well, then how can you do a play for 2.5 hours? She goes, well, it's different when you're doing it because you're multitasking anyway. We're moving things and you're getting in costume and I'm coming this way and you're going that way. That's different. I said, well, what about going and seeing live theater? She goes, that's even worse. Like I have to, and she's an actress.
Yeah.
I have to rev myself up ironically, I went and saw a play with her just a month or so ago and she was fine. I didn't feel like, and she had seen the play before. It was like the second or third time she had seen it. A friend of hers was in it. One of the best things I've seen in Norfolk at the Generic Theater, a play called Dog Sees God about Charlie Brown and the gang grown up and teenagers in high school. It's crazy. It's a crazy play. Most people are like, when I describe what happens in the play, they're like, why did they do that? Don't do that to Charlie Brown. It was very interesting how it played out. It was phenomenal though. It's the best thing I've seen in Norfolk since I've moved back here. Anyway, the point to that is I didn't feel any kind of nervousness or restlessness from her sitting next to her during the play. She was engaged, but I found it interesting that she said that she has to kind of work her mental ability to understand that she's going to sit still for something. And I said, well, is that why people pick up their phones? And she said, yeah, I think so. I think that's why people check their phones during movies and stuff like that. And then she said, they also do that when they're watching Netflix because they can. I said, well, do people stop the movie and then check their phones when they're watching Netflix? And she's like, no, you can do both. And I was like, no, you kind of can't. So I'm not sure if I stopped that moment, but the moment was not paused because of any other reason than it was so emotionally cathartic for me. So that's kind of a difference. I understand what you're saying. I'm wondering, you're right. What are they going to do in the future? How are they going to move these things around to fit what people's watching abilities are? I think that's a dangerous, slippery slope because you don't change Shakespeare because you don't understand the language. You teach people not to understand the language. So you shouldn't change a trailer. So you can change a trailer depending on where you're promoting it. I guess on YouTube, that's a different thing because it's click, 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 click. And I find myself doing that too. And I watched a ton of those actors roundtables, by the way, and those actors on actors, and I love them. They're amazing what those people say. And every one of them are scared to death all the time, nervous as hell. And they talk about how it gets worse. Even Denzel Washington said that he's so nervous during Fences Live that he didn't know if he was going to be able to go out. I'm like, wait, Denzel, you got to know that when you walk out on stage, that people don't care if you go blah, 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 blah. They'll like stand up and cheer because you'll be the best person going blah, 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 that night that they're going to see. So how could you be, but he's scared to death. And I can't remember if not to digress, but I got to tell you this. There was an actress roundtable and I've seen so many of them. I can't really remember who says it, but it seems to be the one with Jane Fonda. I'm not sure if it was or not, but because she did such a great job announcing Best Picture this year, Parasite, that's third time, that we talked about how she kind of took that beat. She read the winner and then she took that beat, looked up and then did that acting moment and then said Parasite, that's 4 times. So she said during one of those actors roundtables that she was so nervous, but once you climb that hill and you get past that, stage fright and you get up above and the view is like nothing you've ever seen before, and it's so worth it once you're up there. And I thought to myself, okay, so this is just normal. This stage fright thing is normal, because there's been times like I literally thought I was not going to be able to walk out. Back to what you were saying about clicking and making things available to how people watch. I hope that filmmakers tell their story. If their story needs that clickbait atmosphere, then do it. If your story needs to move past something in 3 seconds, then do it, Safdie brothers. But if it doesn't, you can't underestimate your audience, that they're not going to sit with you, because 98.9% of the time, they're going to stick with you if you trust them to be smart enough to understand what you're doing. Greta Gerwig and Little Women. There were people who talked about how that kind of jumping around was hard for them to put it together and follow it. Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. You just shook your head no, which is exactly
it
what I'm saying.
Because it sucks. But she risked it. She risked assuming that the audience is going to be on board, and it paid off.
Yeah, she trusted us. Yeah, she trusted us. And it was not, and I can be a little slow on the uptake sometimes. So if I got it, trust me, she did a good job. So, yeah. I mean, it's just, you can't underestimate what the audience is going to take in. That said, back to this film, I was just not reading while we were talking, but I've read a couple of the reviews for this, and people are calling Honey Boy self-indulgent. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier on in the podcast about how this was probably a therapeutic, cathartic experience for Shia LaBeouf, and good for him, because I had an experience watching this movie too. There has to be a really fine line between telling your story in a universal theme way and telling your story in a self-indulgent way. There's a really fine line. And I think this movie teeters back and forth. And I think it goes back to what we've been saying the whole entire podcast. I think if they had just trimmed some stuff, and maybe that's just me not wanting to deal with it, but if they had trimmed some stuff, because I felt like, how else do you tell this story? But I also felt like, why aren't we seeing more of the grown-up Otis? Why are we not seeing more of what's happened to him? You know, because he disappears for quite a while in the film, and then comes back and then disappears and that kind of stuff. And that's purposely told. But I do want to tap into the ending really quick, because there's something that happens when you're watching a movie and it's working, but you can still feel like something is missing, or something's not gelling correctly, or something's not right. And a good ending can solve all of those issues for me. All's well that ends well. And when he sees his father come out of the hotel room dressed as the chicken guy or the clown, and he says, I'm making a movie about you, or I made a movie about you. And then the father says what he does say. I thought, that's a really clever way to end this movie. I thought, that's good. So overall, I'm satisfied by this film. And I liked how they wrapped it up. I liked that he got to face his father at the end. I like how he walked past, what is Shy Girl's, I guess, mother's name? What was her name?
I don't know.
The one that the one that Shia LaBeouf has the argument with earlier on in the film about it's midnight.
Yeah,
got to go to sleep, even though he's screaming at the top of his lungs in the hotel room before he does that. I love when she's there, older, and he walks past her and says hello to her, and then keeps walking to their room. I thought I like that. It's a way of paying homage to everything that we've seen, because you kind of do wonder what did happen to Shy Girl, what happened to these people. And you're right, those sequences between them two are beautiful. Yeah. And they were dangerously teetering on a bit of uncomfortableness, because she's a grown woman and he's a young boy. And I thought to myself instantaneously, not to get into this, but if that was reversed, if that was a young girl and a teenage boy, we would be like, ew, this is icky. And there is a moment where it's just a little bit icky, but it's also how well they strung that together. And I'm sorry, what was Shy Girl's name? What was the actress's name?
FKA Twigs.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
She was amazing. I mean, and this is one of her first things. Good Lord. She has got a future, no doubt. But, overall, it's one of those movies that I'm glad that I saw, but I don't know how much I'm called back to it anytime soon.
Mhm.
And that could be a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did. There were definitely some great things to pull from this film. So I'm interested to see if Shia LaBeouf has any other stories that he wants to tell as a writer. I mean, that's interesting. And I think that the acting performances were solid, all the way across the board. So, and we already talked about the kind of the craft side of it. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. The score was really good too, and it seemed like kind of like a pieced together, I don't want to say found footage, but ambient sound score, which I thought was really interesting. So the music was by Alex Summers, so we'll at least mention him. So yeah, you good?
I'm good.
All right. Well, you can check.
Oh, yeah. One more
Yeah.
thing. Parasite. 5th time.
All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer if you want to interact with us there. And you can also tweet us at actorengineer. And we'll see you next time.